Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at something pretty bizarre, to be honest. Yeah, we're talking about those weird white fibrous clots that embalmers all over the world have been finding, in increasing numbers, really, since like 2021. Yeah, it's pretty wild. We've got a really interesting YouTube video to guide our deep dive today. It features this independent researcher who's been, really digging into this whole thing. He's got all this data from surveys he's been doing with embalmers over the past 3 years. And yeah, the findings they're really something else.
Yeah, what really stands out to me about this researcher is his commitment to gathering, like firsthand information He's been doing these surveys with embalmers every year, and each year, the number of embalmers reporting these like unusual clots has just skyrocketed.
Right. And the results from this latest 2024 survey are really eye-opening. Like a full 83% of the embalmers who participated in the survey said they've encountered these white fibrous clots, which is up from 73% in 2023 and 67% in 2022. So there's definitely something going on here. Like, what's the deal?
Yeah, and it's not just the numbers themselves either, but the fact that even some folks who maybe aren't keen on participating in the survey are still like acknowledging this phenomenon. Like for instance, the researcher contacted the Pennsylvania Funeral Directors Association. They took part in this 2023 survey, but this year they decided not to. However, their president actually emailed the researcher and admitted to seeing these clots himself.
Wow, that's strange, right? It feels like there's something more to this. Like, why wouldn't they participate if their own president has seen these clots?
It does raise some questions like, are there other groups or individuals out there who might be downplaying this or just like ignoring it altogether?
Yeah, that's a good point. So, okay, we know a lot of embalmers are finding these clots, but can you describe them for us? Like, what do they actually look like? How are they different from normal blood clots?
Okay, so imagine pulling this like foot-long rubbery clot out of a body. That's what some embalmers are dealing with. These clots aren't like typical post-mortem clots. The ones that are usually dark and jelly-like and break apart easily. Those are sometimes called like chicken fat clots because they kind of have this yellowish, greasy look.
Yeah.
But these white fibrous clots are totally different. They're large, white, fibrous, and incredibly tough.
A foot-long clot. That's nuts. And you said some embalmers are even describing them as like casts of the vascular system, meaning they actually retain the shape of the arteries.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that makes these clots so fascinating. It suggests that something is happening within the circulatory system itself, something that's causing this unusual clotting to happen.
Yeah, for sure. Now, the researcher also asked embalmers about something called micro-clotting, which, for those who don't know, refers to the formation of these tiny clots that can block up capillaries, those small blood vessels that are essential for oxygen exchange.
Right. And those are sometimes called coffee ground clots or dirty blood because of how they look. And unfortunately, the survey found that micro-clotting is also on the rise. In fact, 78% of embalmers reported seeing micro-clotting in their cases just this past year.
Wow, that's a really high percentage. And it kind of makes you wonder if these clotting percentages that we're seeing in the deceased could actually be a reflection of what's happening in the living population as well.
It's a chilling thought, isn't it?
It is. So the big question is, what's causing these abnormal clots and what might have changed in 2021 that could be connected to all this?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The survey data consistently points to 2021 as the year when things started to shift, when embalmers started noticing these unusual clots. And while the researcher doesn't explicitly ask about it, in his survey questions, many embalmers, in their comments, directly link the phenomenon to the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccines, which of course began that year.
Right. That's definitely a theory that a lot of people have been talking about. But before we jump into speculation, let's dive a little deeper into what the researcher has actually uncovered about these clots themselves. It seems like there's more to the story than just a potential link to 2021.
Absolutely. Let's take a closer look at the actual characteristics of these clots and what the scientific analysis has revealed.
Right. Let's get into the science of it all then.
So we've got a lot of speculation flying around, but let's stick to what we know. From a scientific standpoint, a team of researchers got a hold of some samples of these clots and did some preliminary analysis. What they found is these aren't just like your average blood clots.
Oh, really? What makes them so different? Like, what are they made of?
Well, normal blood clots, they're mainly red blood cells.
Yeah.
And fibrin, that protein that helps create the mesh to stop bleeding. But these white fibrous clots, they've got this like abnormal composition of fibrinogen.
Fibrinogen? Isn't that like the stuff that becomes fibrin? The thing that gets activated to, like, actually form the clot.
Exactly. And not only that,
Yeah.
but they've also got these high levels of amyloid protein.
Amyloid. Doesn't that have something to do with, like, some pretty serious diseases?
You got it. Amyloid proteins are known to, like,
Yeah.
misfold and clump together,
Yeah.
forming those sticky plaques you
Right.
find in the brains of people with Alzheimer's, for example.
Interesting. So these clots have abnormal proteins. Any ideas why that might be happening? Is there any connection to, the stuff we were talking about earlier, the events of 2021?
Well, the researchers have a couple of theories. One focuses on the spike protein, the one produced by those mRNA vaccines. The idea is that this spike protein might be triggering this protein misfolding, leading to the amyloid formation, and ultimately these weird clots we've been discussing.
So it's like the introduction of the spike protein is messing with the body's normal protein folding process.
Yeah, that's the gist of it. Their second theory is all about the lipid nanoparticles that are used to deliver the mRNA in those vaccines.
Lipid nanoparticles?
Yeah, those are basically tiny bubbles of fat, essentially, that help protect and transport the mRNA to the right spots in the body.
Like a little delivery system.
Exactly. But the researchers think that these lipid nanoparticles might be interacting with our natural fibrinogen in a way that messes up normal clotting and could lead to the formation of these white fibrous structures.
So both theories basically point to the mRNA vaccines as a possible culprit, either the spike protein itself or the way it's delivered.
Right. But it's important to remember, these are just preliminary findings. We need more research.
Absolutely. Now, the researcher in the video, he also shares some pretty compelling anecdotes from embalmers and even some whistleblowers in the medical field. What do you think about those accounts?
Well, anecdotal evidence, it can be pretty powerful,
Yeah.
especially when it comes from multiple sources and lines up with other observations. Like, the researcher includes some pretty striking quotes from embalmers describing how hard it is to deal with these tough clots. One said it's like battling a rubber band. And another, I've been saying for the last 3 years, this isn't normal.
Yeah, those firsthand accounts are pretty vivid.
They are. And he also includes accounts from a cardiologist and an endovascular specialist who both claim to have extracted similar white fibrous clots from living patients.
Wow, that's pretty big.
It is. These whistleblowers are staying anonymous, though, worried about professional backlash,
Yeah, that's understandable. But it also makes it hard to really verify their claims, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
But the fact that they're coming forward at all, even anonymously, suggests they believe this is important and needs to be investigated.
For sure. Now, not everyone's convinced, though, right? The researcher includes a quote from an embalmer who dismisses the whole thing.
Right. He basically says that he's never seen anything unusual in all his years of embalming and attributes it to things like refrigeration or, conspiracy theories.
So even within the embalming community, there are differing opinions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Just like in any profession, really. Not everyone's going to interpret the data or their experiences in the same way.
Right. That's where critical thinking comes in.
Exactly.
We have to weigh the evidence, consider different perspectives, and form our own conclusions.
That's why it's so important to have open and honest discussions about this stuff.
Definitely. So one of the key takeaways here is the researcher's call for further investigation.
Absolutely. He's not claiming to have all the answers, but he's urging scientists and doctors and public health authorities to take this seriously and do more in-depth research.
He's basically saying, hey, we've got this potentially serious thing happening. Let's not just dismiss it or jump to conclusions. Let's study it, get more data, and figure out what's really going on.
Exactly.
And that's a call to action that I think resonates with a lot of people. We can't just sit around and wait for answers. We need to be proactive.
I agree.
Ask questions and demand transparency. It really feels like we're at a crossroads here.
Yeah, I'd say so.
On the one hand, we've got these anecdotal reports and this preliminary research that raised some red flags,
Right.
But then on the other hand, you've got people pushing back, saying it's nothing unusual, and we still don't have, solid scientific proof either way.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in, for sure.
I bet some of you listening are thinking, what am I supposed to make of all this?
That's understandable.
So let's just take a breath here and try to connect some of the dots, okay?
Sounds good.
We've looked at these strange clots. what they're made of, and some possible explanations.
Yeah.
We've heard from embalmers, some who are like really freaked out, and others who aren't convinced.
Yeah.
And we talked about the limitations of anecdotal evidence
Right.
and the need for, real scientific research.
Exactly.
So, what now? What's the takeaway for all of us listening who are trying to figure this out?
Well, I think the most important thing is to stay curious and stay informed.
Absolutely.
Don't just
Yeah.
take everything you hear at face value,
Yeah.
whether it's from
Yeah.
the news or health officials or even from us.
Yeah, for sure. Do your own research, ask questions, and get different perspectives.
Right.
And if something doesn't feel right to you, don't be afraid to,
Okay.
dig a little deeper.
Exactly.
Knowledge is power, right?
It is.
Especially these days when we're bombarded with information all the time.
Absolutely.
It's wild to think that embalmers, these folks who deal with the vascular system after death, might be giving us clues about what's happening in the living.
It's a fascinating thought.
If they're seeing these unusual trends, what does that mean for us? What should we be asking our doctors? What can we do to push for more research and transparency?
Those are all important questions.
Yeah.
And I don't think there are any easy answers.
But I do know that by having these conversations, sharing information, and demanding answers, we can start to get a better handle on this.
I agree.
This has been quite a deep dive. And we've really only just scratched the surface.
That's true.
There's still so much we don't know. But hopefully this has gotten you thinking.
Yeah, hopefully it's encouraged you to, question things a bit more.
Yeah, exactly. And remember, this isn't just about clots.
No.
It's about being informed, taking charge of your health, and really being proactive.
Yes,
We've covered a lot today, and we appreciate you joining us.
thanks for listening.
Share this deep dive with anyone you think might be interested. Let's keep the conversation going.
Absolutely.
Until next time, stay curious.
Stay informed.
And thanks for taking the deep dive with us. End of transcript.